They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmers podcast.
Welcome into the program, everybody. I'm Lou Ruggieri. That's Jose Ortiz. And this is the Benchwarmers podcast. Wherever, whenever, and however you might be listening, we appreciate you taking some time out of your day to spend it with us. We will try to do our best to make it worth your time. Huge show this week. This is week 17. We, in full disclosure, we had a bit of a bye week last week. Jose, it's mostly my fault. I had we had a power outage from the giant hurricane that hit the East Coast, and also for some reason I had a massive ear infection and could not stand up straight and kept falling over, which makes doing radio extremely hard. So I just want to put that out there. So that's why if anybody's curious why we missed a week, we're just going to call that a bye week, and hopefully we're going to make up for it this week. We do have a monster show for you this week. So much is going on. We have real sports. It's incredible. We're very excited. And coming up in the second hour of the show, we're going to be talking NFL because it's fun, a little baseball. In a little bit, we're going to be touching on all of the NBA news that's been happening and sort of some of the situations that we're seeing that are kind of exciting. And first off, we're going to touch on some late breaking news. It wasn't, it's today. We're recording this on Tuesday. And it's bad news because the Big Ten, Pac-12, and MAC football have all canceled their fall sports. And it's kind of a bummer. And Jose, I just wanted to get right off the bat, your initial reaction to the lack of college football coming up.
Well, it's certainly risk management. As tough it is, and as tough as it is for these players to lose a season, I think it's the right call. I don't want to be hiding scared from the coronavirus, but I just feel like you can't be on the wrong side of history here. Maybe if you end up playing out the season and everything works out just fine, then we're moving on and no one even talks about it and you just have regular football. But what are the chances that happens? We've seen in Major League Baseball, which has only been open for 3 weeks, mm-hmm. We see that grown men getting paid millions and millions of dollars can't handle themselves the right way as far as coronavirus protection. We've seen that also in the NBA, although it hasn't resulted in any positive tests.
Oh, yeah, now we're going to
Lou Williams. Yeah. Now we're going to ask college students to do the right thing, to make the right decisions. We're going to really trust them to be doing the right things at all times and social distancing and all those different things. There's too much of a risk to me, and you can't say that the health and safety of our players are our number one concern and then go ahead with the college football season in the fall. And to me, the thing that is the worst case scenario is you play and there's a coronavirus outbreak that goes through numerous teams or numerous divisions or conferences or the entire NCAA. And then when you're asked to explain yourself to why you decided to put these players in jeopardy, and your answer is just to play football, it's one thing to put yourself in jeopardy to go to work and earn a living because you have to pay rent. It's one thing to put yourself in jeopardy because you have to go to the store and buy food for your family. But to play football when you could just play in the spring, it seems unnecessary, and it seems like the smart thing to do is just wait till the spring, wait it out, don't take any chances.
So there's a couple things that struck me as kind of interesting with this. And, the Big Ten voted 12-2 that they were in favor of canceling the football season. The two schools that voted for football in the Big Ten, which are kind of surprising. I would have guessed Ohio State and Michigan just because, it's like mm-hmm. They just want to play each other no matter where they are or what's going on. But it was actually Nebraska and Iowa were the two schools that voted for football, which is interesting, and I'm not sure what that says about Iowa or Nebraska. That's for a different discussion for a different day. But it seems like the closer we were getting to this, the more real it got. And we kind of saw a little of this with the NBA bubble, where it was like everybody in June was just like, yeah, absolutely, let's go in the bubble, no problem. And then once it got closer, people started opting out because they're like, oh, crap, we really are going to do this now. And I think part of that thinking and feeling is what happened with college football. And I think the closer we were getting, that the more and more decision makers were getting involved and higher and on a higher level. And so you get these presidents who don't think in terms of rah-rah fandom. I mean, I'm sure they do on some level, but they have more responsibility and bigger issues to concern themselves with, and not the least of which is basically just being liable for what's happening. So I think what you're saying is right in that you don't want to be on the right side of history. Now, the thing that I want to ask you and everyone is, I feel like there's a trickle-down effect here for sure. It affects all of college sports, and this is going to be a huge blow to football. Football is the breadwinner of every college, with very few exceptions. But doesn't it seem like you would have a better, if you're a college athlete, aren't you safer if you're part of a sports program where you're being tested, every day or every other day, versus going to school and like if dorms are open? I've seen some dorms open. It's how can you, those kids aren't being tested every day when they walk into their dorm, and they're within, a couple hundred square feet of each other all the time. So I think that there's a pretty solid argument that can be made for the idea that, having football would be safer for some of these athletes than it would for just regular students. So if that's the case, then the only way that this makes sense to me is if we see colleges cancel dormitories and on-school, on-campus classes, because otherwise it seems kind of strange.
Well, we've already seen some colleges move to online. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a blanket across, and I don't know every team in the Pac-12 or the Big Ten that's doing that. But the one flaw, because you're right, yes, if you're getting tested every day, obviously you're safer. But Major League Baseball having testing every day, right? Mm-hmm. They have over 35 coronavirus cases. They've had multiple games canceled as a result of this whole thing. It's also, if they are, let's say the school is open and you're having football, now you're introducing players from other universities where we don't know what the standards we don't know what they're doing. Not all programs are created equal. Even though you could have it written down on paper that this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, nothing's going to slip through the cracks. In reality, things always slip through the cracks. Almost always slip through the cracks. So we can't trust college students to be perfect. We can't trust adults to be perfect. I don't want to say that if you're older, you're more perfect than when you're younger, but I feel like I make better decisions now than I did when I was 20. And so I don't know. I think that, it's a good point. It's a fair point that, hey, we're going to get tested every day. We're going to be quarantined. We're going to be safe. I think the safest thing that schools can do is try and go completely to online classes or have staggered schedules where a limited amount of students are on campus every day, mm-hmm. and just try and hold off until the spring. Here's the thing. If you look at the percentage chance of you getting coronavirus, and people don't want to hear this, right? This is not the right line. It's not very high, right? It's not like you have a 50% chance of getting coronavirus or a 25% chance of getting coronavirus. It's not like you hear some things. It's not like you walk out the door and you just die, right?
Yeah,
so there's
polio.
Yeah, exactly. So there's it's not AIDS. It's a little bit different, but at the same time, just because one person is willing to put themselves at whatever risk it is, mm-hmm. if you catch it, someone else might get it too, who didn't want to put themselves at that risk. So it just seems like the safest thing to do is just do everything you can to limit as much contact as possible. And it seemed like this was a simple decision to make, although the Big 12, ACC, and SEC seem to still be moving forward. So we're going to see. We're going to see come November, December, if the SEC and ACC don't have any coronavirus cases, then it looks like the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 and the Big Ten made the wrong decision. That's really what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, And I think one of the, and I'll talk about the SEC in a second because I think this is far-reaching effects from all this. But I think it's not a coincidence that there was a finding that at least 5 of the Big Ten conference athletes showed this new thing that we're gonna start hearing more about, and it's inflammation of the heart as a result of having COVID, which it's called myocarditis, or something like to that effect. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's a heart muscle inflammation, and I think that because it's such a brand new thing and a new wrinkle to this entire COVID thing where we thought we had a handle on it, these might be sort of hidden, long-lasting effects, and I think that because it was in the Big Ten, I'm sure that played a very big role in those decision makers saying, you know what, better safe than sorry.
And what about lawsuits?
Right.
I don't think they want to get hit with any lawsuits if something happens. I'm not sure how protected they would be, but I'm not a lawyer, so I have no idea. But I'm sure that's a possibility.
Yeah, there's definitely, if there's money to be made, if you can sue a university or sue a college program, you got to believe that there's lawyers that would take that and run with it. But so to get back to what you're saying, and by the way, this is the Benchwarmers podcast. You can follow us along. By the way, I am so bad at shameless self-promotion. We are the Benchwarmers at the Benchwarmers podcast at yahoo.com, Benchwarmers with a Z for marketing purposes. We are on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We are on the iHeartRadio podcasting app, Spotify, Apple, Google, anywhere and everywhere you get podcasts. I don't know why I just lost that word for a second, but in any event, to talk about the SEC for a second, I think that there's a very long shot that this doesn't affect the NCAA permanently, because for a long time the SEC, granted they're looked at as sort of like there's college football, there's the NFL, and then somewhere in between is sort of the SEC as a standalone conference. They're sort of like, the NFL light almost. And we see it, in drafts and everything. Aside from maybe Clemson and Ohio State, the SEC they just dominate NFL drafts. And so the SEC has been kind of chomping at the bit for a while to kind of be their own conference. And there's been rumors about, the Power 5 conferences sort of seceding from the NCAA. And right now, at the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 are still going forward with football. Big 12 just announced today that they're continuing with their football program. So I think that the SEC might take this. I think after this season that NCAA football is never going to be the same, because I think that this is going to be sort of the stepping stone for the SEC to show everyone, to show us and go, look, we can do this on our own, and we can do it just as good as the NCAA, if not better. And our champion can beat any of the other champions, I guess, outside of Clemson, if you're paying attention for the last couple of years. But I think that it's a good way for them to sort of market and get into that space where they're their own conference.
Well, I think that would be a bad decision by the SEC. I'm not saying that it can't happen, but what is there? 14 schools in the SEC. I don't know exactly off the top of my head how many schools there are in the SEC, but I don't think that I care that much who Kentucky is playing. I think they're in the SEC. Like when we talk SEC, there's LSU, there's Florida, there's Alabama, but there's also Tennessee, who not that good.
There's 14 school universities that are.
Yeah, there's not all of them are these super amazing schools. There's like 5 of them, if I can remember off the top of my head, that are actually, these dominant teams that are always good every year. Meanwhile, Ohio State's good every year. Michigan's decent every year. Florida State has just recently won a national championship within the last few years. Clemson won a national championship. USC is relevant. Notre Dame is relevant. By going to, that'd be like the NFC East seceding from the NFL or whatever. Take whatever, the NFC West. Let's say the NFC West is the best division in the NFL this year. That would be dumb. Why would you secede from the NFL? Now, if all the Power 5 schools together were to do it, then I think you'd have something. But I'm not seeing unity right now because two of the conferences, the Big Ten and the Big Ten and the Pac-12, are not playing football this year. So if this is going to be the jumping off point, I don't see how they would be partnering with the Big 12 or the Big Ten or the Pac-12. Maybe they could partner with the ACC, which has two good football schools, and so I don't know. Maybe I'm not seeing something. Maybe I'm missing something.
Well, so I mean, I think that I agree with some of what you said, but I think that maybe the point that you might be missing is that, okay, so if the SEC goes forward with this and they're successful, not only are they going to dominate the talk, the sports world, the sportscasters like us talking about this, they're going to dominate. I mean, ratings and the money is just going to, if they're the only game in town, literally, they're going to just crush with TV contracts. So it might be a thing where let's say the SEC secedes and just says, you know what, we're going to do our own thing. And then maybe they're not the SEC anymore. Maybe they're whatever. And they start recruiting and they say, hey, Ohio State, you know what, we're going to drop Vanderbilt. We need somebody to fill in. Do you want to come join us where the big boys play? And we'll call ourselves whatever, the big SEC or something, or whatever it is. They just change it altogether and they get away from those tags that they were in with the NCAA and sort of rebrand themselves and kind of recruit schools, Clemson, Ohio State, and sort of take people in Oregon even. I mean, could probably fit in there. I mean, they wouldn't do great, but
the only thing I would worry about with that is I don't know if it would be blanket for the other sports, right? I don't know if you could be because we're just thinking about football, but what about basketball, baseball, like all the other sports?
It's true.
Now they have to make the same travel, right? They have to go from Ohio State to Alabama or wherever, just fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would. I don't know. You might be able to. I'm not 100% sure about the rules. You might be able to have the football team in one conference and then the rest of the teams in another conference. If that's the case, then your idea that does have a little bit more legs than I realized. But I'm just thinking about just logistics of traveling. That's part of the reason why you have conferences, so you don't have to travel so far.
Right. Well, so I think it's interesting to see what they're going to do, because I do think that this is going to change football in college sports, and I think generally as football goes, so does college sports, because they're the ringleaders of everything, with a very very few exceptions. The other thing that this cancellation of the fall sports season for the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and MAC does is I think that it really really hurts some players in college, because I mean,
Absolutely.
if you think of Joe Burrow, I mean, Joe Burrow was going to be a 5th round draft pick until he just exploded and had the best quarterbacking season we've ever seen from a college quarterback, and then he became the 1st overall pick. And the same thing for Kyler Murray was going to be a baseball player, and then all of a sudden he had this this crazy good season, and suddenly he's the number 1 pick too.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I was actually talking about that with someone today, and I think that's really what I feel worst about. The players who, because we know Trevor Lawrence is going to be the number 1 pick next season, right? No matter what happens, right, he's going to be the number 1 pick.
Now. Yes,
he's going to be the number 1 pick. There's certain players, if you're in the 1st or 2nd round right now, you probably don't even have to play this season, and you'll be fine. But if you're anything below that, nothing is set in stone. And so, yeah, you're right. You're losing a year where maybe you could go from the 5th round to the 2nd round, or you could go from unknown to being draftable, or any number of different things. So yeah, losing a year. And I actually, even going deeper than that, I feel bad for a lot of high school players who are playing sports and maybe are trying to get a scholarship. Maybe this will be their first year as a starter. There's a number of this has such an enormous trickle down effect.
Yep.
From seniors in college to seniors in high school to juniors and seniors in college to rookies in the NFL next season and this season. This is it's just a very difficult spot. Yeah, no, it's a great point. A lot of players are going to miss out on an opportunity to really build their draft stock, and I'm hoping that the NCAA takes some sort of action similar to what the NFL did with the opt-outs and just say, hey, listen, if you opt out this season because of coronavirus, you get an extra year of eligibility. That seems like that would be an easy way of fixing the entire thing. I don't know if they're going to do that, but that seems like
I think that's a very good idea. Well, I guess we'll see. I mean, this is changing constantly. We're constantly seeing, and by next week's show, I mean, who knows? It could be everybody's canceled, or it could be just the SEC and the ACC are joining forces. Which, I mean, if we see Alabama versus Rutgers, I mean, not that Rutgers is in the ACC anymore, but they were for a while. I mean, I can't even. I mean, we might see the first 100-point game. And I don't know. There's a lot of scenarios that this could bring about that would be that were unfathomable not too long ago. But
I think there's just just the last thing I'll say is, as much as I'll be excited to watch the SEC and ACC and the Big 12, I think it's a tremendous risk that they're taking just to play sports. It just seems like a tremendous risk. I hope it works out, but it seems like a tremendous risk.
I do have a point to make about that. When we're going to talk NFL at the top of next hour, and I kind of have a question about that very topic, very thing that you just mentioned. But we'll get to that in the second hour. But coming up next, we have to get to a sport that is happening in the NBA, and we have just a litany of things to get to the NBA that I'm very excited about because it's actually happening and it's real sports. So we'll have that for you coming back when we come back. And so stick around. This is the Benchwarmers podcast, and we'll be right back.
You can reduce your risk of COVID-19 by cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched items and surfaces every day. These items include remotes, tables, counters, light switches, doorknobs, handles, toilets, and sinks. Wear disposable gloves to clean and disinfect. If you can see that the item is dirty, wash first with soap and water or another general cleaner. Then use a household disinfectant to kill germs. Follow manufacturer's instructions for application and proper ventilation to safely use the product. For phones or other electronics, follow the manufacturer's instructions for cleaning and disinfecting. If no instructions, use alcohol-based wipes or sprays containing at least 70% alcohol. Dry surface thoroughly. For more tips, visit cdc.gov.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm Lou, that's Jose, and this is still the Benchwarmers podcast. We appreciate you taking some time out of your day to spend it with us. First segment of the hour one, pretty good, pretty solid. A lot of college football sports, or lack thereof, we talked about. But now, Jose, I want to touch on something that's really happening, and that's the NBA. The NBA is back, and we've seen this, this little regular season finale, it's coming to a close. And I want to just first off, there's good news and bad news. The bad news, let's start with the good news. The good news is I really want to pat the NBA on the back and give them credit, because this, for a while, felt like it was going to be such an incredible undertaking on how to do it, how the logistics of it, how to get everybody into this bubble and keep them there and do everything, on the up and up. And so far, they have been spectacular. There's been really no consequence of anybody. Everybody's kind of doing, for the most part, everyone's doing what they're supposed to. And I think that they deserve a lot of credit, actually. So that's the good news. The bad news is that Ben Simmons is out for the season. He dislocated his kneecap, and he is now done. And that's sort of as far as I'm concerned, I don't know how you feel, but I think that's the end of the Sixers' run in this, what could have been a Cinderella season for them.
Yeah, that's the end. I never thought they had a beginning, if that's the case. I didn't really expect them to do much, especially because they were going to be facing the Boston Celtics in the first round. The Boston Celtics are a better coached team. They're deeper. They are more talented. Yes, they're more talented. And as far as Ben Simmons, what I think this brings up to me, and it's unfortunate that Ben Simmons is injured. I think he's a nice, young, promising player. But it makes me wonder. It started making me think about the ceiling of the Sixers. You talk the trust of the process. Yep. With Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons.
Has the process worked?
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on what your standards are. If your standards are to be a playoff team every year, then yeah, I guess it worked. If your standards are to be contending for a championship, I don't think that we can pretend that they've been in contention for a championship at any point in time. listen, last year, maybe if Kawhi Leonard's last second shot doesn't bounce 4 times and go in, maybe we're talking about the Sixers differently right now. But the fact is that it did happen that way. And you look at the Sixers roster, they have, I think I calculated $121 million tied into Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Al Horford, and who's the other player? I'm sorry. They have basically into 4 players.
Yeah.
And it's not a winning roster to me. And so now you have to look at it and say, okay, who are we going to be able to trade to actually get some money back? And the other player is Tobias Harris. I just slipped my head.
That's right.
Who are we going to be able to trade to actually get somebody back and build something? And I think the answer is Ben Simmons, except he just lost some value now because we haven't seen him really take that next step. If you look at his first season and you look at this last season, he's basically the same player. We haven't seen him take another step to become the superstar that he was supposed to be when he came out of LSU.
So if you had to choose, and you're the Sixers front office, and this process is, still processing or whatever, do you keep, if you can only keep one, are you keeping Embiid or are you keeping Ben Simmons?
I'm keeping Embiid. I think Embiid has shown he hasn't played a full season his entire career. So he's shown that he has some injury concerns, but I think when you look at him at his ceiling, he's far better than Ben Simmons. I mean, last year we saw glimpses of what he could be when he averaged 27.5 a game, 13.6 rebounds per game, almost 2 block shots, and then all those numbers came down this season. So I'm just gonna write it off to just a bad year. I don't know, but Ben Simmons has shown no improvement. If you just look at his numbers, it's basically the same guy over the first 3 years of his career. Now, that could be coaching. I don't know. But to me, Ben Simmons is much more easily replaceable than Joel Embiid.
See, Embiid, I agree. I'll agree with you in that because I think I would keep Ben Simmons, and I'm not just saying that. I'm not just saying that as a point counterpoint. I don't. This isn't. We're not going to be Skip Bayless or whatever, but Joel Embiid, I will grant you, has a higher ceiling than Ben Simmons. I think at his best, Joel Embiid could be Anthony Davis or better. I think he could be Shaq light if he really put his mind to it. But the problem is, it seems like he has some maturity issues. It seems like he has some dedication issues with diet and conditioning and things like that, that take hard work and a lot of focus. And it doesn't seem like it just feels like he's sort of just enjoying the ride without really wanting to be better. I think he's happy with how good he is and how he plays on the floor. And I think that it sort of feels like he's just kind of status quo. It's like, this is what I am and this is what I'm going to be and whatever after that. Ben Simmons, on the other hand, I think, granted, you're right, he hasn't really changed that much from season to season. But he did kind of switch positions. He's sort of a point forward now. He's not a point guard, which I think is better for him. Although I did like the idea of seeing a 6'10" point guard a la, Magic Johnson-esque. But he doesn't, his shooting is not there. He doesn't take shots. In the bubble, it seems like he's taking more shots than he was last season, which is an improvement. It's not great, but it's certainly a leg up. And I think that, in a very guard-centric league, I think a guy like Ben Simmons, if you could complement him with, I don't know, let's say somebody like Jimmy Butler maybe, and get rid of Joel Embiid, I think that they would be in a much better position. And that leads me to my question for you is, should the Sixers have kept Jimmy Butler? Because I think that Jimmy Butler was the best of those 3, and I think we're seeing sort of what Jimmy Butler can be on the Heat. He's for the 19-20 season, he's averaging 20 points a game, almost 7 rebounds and 6 assists. He's just crushing.
So the answer to your question is that, they should have kept Jimmy Butler, but they should have gotten rid of Ben Simmons. This season, that's a great year from Jimmy Butler. Joel Embiid in a bad season is averaging 23.5 a game and 11.8 rebounds. Joel Embiid has superstar potential. Mm-hmm. I don't see that and Ben Simmons. And yes, I think that Jimmy Butler's a good player, but I think Jimmy Butler's the type of guy who's probably better suited as your second best player. And maybe that's the same thing for Joel Embiid, to be honest with you. I don't know, because you look at his postseason numbers and they did dip dramatically last year. And maybe that's why you need a guy like a Jimmy Butler who can kind of be that kind of cold-blooded guy who can just step up in big moments and hit outside shots. But I look at Joel Embiid as being a great player, and I think Ben Simmons is the guy. They should have kept Jimmy Butler, yes, but Ben Simmons is the guy who should have been the odd man out. Trade him and get get 2 first-round picks or get something like that for a guy like Ben Simmons. And now that he's got the injury history, the injury this year, I think his value is going to go down a little bit. But you could have gotten 2 first-round picks for Ben Simmons last season.
Well, what we've seen with the Sixers and draft picks is that they seem to like to, keep processing, so to speak. And I don't think that the process has really worked. I mean, they have gotten better, but I mean, they were basically tanking for what, 2 years, 3 years in a row almost?
5 years, I feel like, but maybe.
And so, with all of that suffering for those fans and the culture hit that team takes, it doesn't feel like that they, look at Boston. Boston didn't tank, and they just pieced together a great roster. They pulled some pieces in, put some pieces out, and I don't know. I feel like the process that we kept hearing about is not really all it was cracked up to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no arguing about that. Yeah. The process is not anyone can be a second round NBA team. I don't want to say anyone, but you don't have to tank for 5 years or however many years it was to get eliminated in the second round of the NBA playoffs. So, yeah.
So all right. Enough with the Sixers. We have a lot more teams to talk about, but so I do have a question in terms of staying in the East for a second. I want to ask this question. The Raptors are doing very well right now. They're, kicking ass and taking names in the bubble. Siakam's playing well. Van Vliet looks like a superstar, that he was trying to be last year. And so here's my question to you. If the Raptors let's say they make it to the finals. I don't think they're going to win the finals, but let's say they just get there. Does that hurt how we look at Kawhi Leonard? Because, Kawhi last year was, it was his year. He had this, the shot you said against the Sixers, the 4-bouncer. I'm pretty sure he was the finals MVP, and he, that's his 1 year in, and they won the championship. So, but now if the Raptors make it again, it sort of looks like, Nick Nurse is sort of the prodigy, and Kawhi might have been a nice piece to get them over the hump, but maybe he's not quite the superstar that we thought he was.
It certainly demythizes him a little bit. It doesn't make him seem like this conquering hero that everywhere he arrives, he just wins a championship. It would have been like if LeBron left the Cleveland Cavaliers and they ended up winning another championship after he left. It's like, okay, well, maybe it's not LeBron, but they end up being a lottery team after he leaves, and it shows how great he is.
Yep.
The fact that Kawhi Leonard left and Pascal Siakam, was able to take another step forward, it really just shows that they did have another star with them last year. It wasn't Kawhi Leonard and company. It was Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam and company. They had another star there. They just didn't realize it at that point. And listen, he had 32 points in Game 1 of the NBA Finals last season. He showed that he was that level of player in the postseason last year. So I don't necessarily know if it means less about Kawhi Leonard than it just takes a little shine off of his heroics last season. But I don't want to take too much away from him. He was still great last year, and I don't want to take too much away.
Fair enough. I think that it does kind of dampen the myth and the legend of Kawhi Leonard as this hired assassin to win championships. And I think that he that combined with his load management, I think takes him down a peg. I think LeBron's on that top shelf, and then maybe you could make an argument that Giannis is there, but Giannis hasn't won anything yet outside of a couple awards and a bunch of regular season games. And then Kawhi is in sort of that. I would put him and Giannis together right now. But I don't know. It's an interesting. It's a constantly changing, interesting situation. But
I think LeBron's spot at the top is tentative right now. Like if he wins, if they win the championship, he's solidified at the top. If Giannis wins, if the Bucks win, if the Clippers win, then all of a sudden one of those two players probably vaults ahead of him.
Yep. And so there's been some interesting things in the bubble that we've seen. I think New Orleans is officially out of the playoffs now, which kind of sank all of the NBA's conspiracy theory dreams to get
Zion.
Zion, sorry, I was still on Giannis, to get Zion in the spotlight for the playoffs. So that's gone, and I guess I don't know. They're a young team, and maybe they just weren't really ready. But a team that I do think is ready, and I think could cause some serious damage, is the Portland Trailblazers. And they're scary. And I will say this right now, and this is not breaking news, but Damian Lillard is really good.
He is so nasty. I have been just all about Damian Lillard for the last 2 or 3 years. He is so nasty. He's so good. The one thing, and I don't even want to nitpick at his game because he's so great. He just dropped 61 just tonight to get another win for the Trailblazers to get them even closer. I think they're actually officially in the number 8 spot right now, but his field goal percentage is a little questionable. He's 43%, I think, for his career, or in that area, and that's the one thing that worries me about his ability to win a championship. Just because if you think about the teams in recent history that have won championships, usually the number one player is a much more efficient scorer than that, and not so hot and cold. That's kind of what we've seen with even James Harden. It's like, well, if he's hot, if he's on, then he can't be stopped. But if he goes cold, then the Rockets lose.
Yeah.
And so that would be the one thing where I'm worried about, like, how far they can go, because if you live and die by the 3 and shooting long shots, eventually you're going to die. So that's the only thing I worry about.
Yeah, and that is something to be said for the record. I think Damian Lillard might be my favorite player in the NBA right now.
Yeah.
A second though, I'm watching a lot of NBA, and Luka Doncic is disgusting. I was watching him the other day, and between, I think, him and Porzingis, I think the Porzingis trade is so underrated. And the two of them together, I mean, Porzingis, he's been hitting threes. I think he had 30 points tonight. And he's just, I don't know. It's like he has a new lease on life.
Well, anytime anyone leaves the Knicks, you know, I think that basically, well, as far as Porzingis, I think he was traded. Part of the reason he got traded is because there was an allegation against him, and I don't want to get too far into it, but there was a legal allegation against him. And I think the Knicks were trying to get rid of him before he got suspended, and it turns out that it didn't seem like it materialized into anything.
He was also very unhappy with the team, which is not surprising, because
how could you be happy with them? How could you be happy with the Knicks? I don't want to get into a Knicks bashing session here. It's so easy to do. It's just not even fair. But how could you really be happy being a Knick? If you get drafted by the Knicks, you probably cry. It's just terrible.
And it's a shame too, because Madison Square Garden is a magical place to play basketball. It really is. It's just, in that uniform, you're not going to win. You know, I think the NBA should. I mean, I don't think that they have any real grounds to do so, but they should really. I mean, if I'm Adam Silver, I might make a call to Dolan and just say, "Hey, man, come on, you got to stop."
Well, really, you said a few weeks ago, you started saying if a team is, doesn't win in 30 years or whatever, they should change their name. Maybe they should change their owner. Maybe that's
both
what should happen.
Yeah, make it change both. That's fine. Yeah.
But no, it's back to your Luka Doncic point.
Yeah,
he is so disgusting.
I mean,
he's on the verge of being a top 3 player in the NBA. Like right now, I don't know if you could name 5 better players than him in the NBA. He's so good, and
his average is 29. He's averaging 29 points a game, 9.5 rebounds, and almost 9 assists. So he's averaging almost a 30-point triple double for the season.
He's having a better season than LeBron. That's why I don't understand why he's not in the MVP discussion. I know it's only his second year.
Yeah, well, that's why.
It doesn't matter. Like he's ridiculous. I'm sure there has to be a second-year player that has done better, that's won an MVP award. I don't know off the top of my head, but there has to have been. And he's putting up numbers. I can't imagine that a second-year player in the NBA has put up, other than Wilt Chamberlain, has put up much better numbers than Luka Doncic has put up this season. I just don't see it. And he's basically carrying the Mavericks to the playoffs. And if I'm the Clippers, I am not happy about seeing the Mavericks in round 2 right now. I'm wishing I'm the Lakers, even though the Lakers are struggling. I would much rather be the Lakers and have to face the Blazers than be the Clippers and have to face the Mavericks, because I think Doncic has a chance to be even better than Damian Lillard.
Yeah, I mean, I think potential-wise, I think he's up there. I mean, we don't know what his ceiling is. And for the record, Derrick Rose won the MVP in his third year, so it might be next year. I mean, I think that people are going to start. Doncic is going to be on people's radars this year as a superstar, and I think next year, because we're always looking for that next story, I think that Doncic is. You could be right, and he could be the MVP as of next season if he keeps even a remotely close pace as he's setting this season.
Well, also, we don't know what he's going to do in the postseason. I don't think they were in the playoffs last year. So if he goes to the postseason and goes nuts and averages something like 40 a game, now the buzz is just going to even be growing even much more, and he's going to go into the next season as a favorite, one of the favorites to win the MVP.
Yeah, and that team is a little bit, I think, is a little bit underrated, honestly, because they're, obviously Doncic is ridiculous. Porzingis, like we said, I think is sort of flying under the radar. And they're just, I don't know, it just seems like they work well together. It seems like they're sort of just the cohesion. Maybe it's Doncic himself. Maybe he's just sort of he's got that LeBron characteristic where he just can bring the best out of people. I don't know. It's very scary. I would like you said, I would not want to face them in the postseason at all.
Speaking of MVP awards, did you see that Giannis, Harden, and LeBron were named the finalists? Do you have a selection?
I mean, I think it's LeBron. Okay. And I think that we saw Giannis last year, and that was fun. Harden, I don't think Harden is an MVP. I mean, I know he's won it, but I mean, he's a regular season wonder. He's like the Alex Rodriguez of basketball. It's just regular season he blows up, and then the postseason it just crumbles. Something always happens, and he just doesn't make it. LeBron, granted. It's you don't get points for longevity, but I think that has to factor in, and being his 17th, 18th season, and not only playing at the level he's playing, as a very, very, very seasoned veteran, he also reinvented himself, and he's led the league in assists this year. I mean, that's incredible to teach an old dog new tricks like that, and to be the number one seed in the West. And granted, the Warriors were not the Warriors, so the West wasn't quite as formidable as it may have been in recent years. But still, to change teams and to go from basically a non-playoff team to number one in the league or in the conference how is that not the most valuable player?
Well, as far as Harden, I agree that he's not a postseason performer. The MVP, though, is more of a regular season award. That's why Alex Rodriguez has 3, and Giannis Harden already has 1. If it went to the postseason, what would Jordan have, like 15? I don't even know how many MVP awards Jordan would have at this point but in his career. But I think it's Giannis, not only because of his offensive ability. He's also in contention for Defensive Player of the Year, which I don't think can be overlooked.
Very true.
So they have the number one team in the entire NBA. But if they gave it to LeBron, I wouldn't be putting up some sort of argument. I think he's certainly worthy, and Harden is not even in discussion. It should have been Luka Doncic in there, and Harden on the outside looking in. But
I think even Chris Paul should have gotten some votes, quite honestly, for, when he got traded to Charlotte was it the Hornets, it felt like just like a salary dump from the Rockets. And,
you mean to the Thunder?
Thunder. I'm sorry. What am I saying? Yeah, Thunder.
You're thinking about before he went to the Rockets.
Yes, that's it.
Yes,
that's right. Okay, I knew there was a Hornets thing in there somewhere, but yeah, he's been bounced around a lot. Yeah, going to the Thunder when it felt like a salary dump with the Rockets, and he's quietly put together a very impressive season. So, he's not going to win MVP, but I mean, I think that there should be a nod in his general direction as far as getting a couple votes here there. But all right. So we're up against the break. So we're gonna stop here for now. We're gonna come back. Hour 2 is coming up next. We have more real sports to talk about. Some baseball. We're gonna touch on all kinds of things. And coming up next, we're gonna talk some NFL and sort of how the college news affects the NFL and sort of how all of the the COVID NFL season and what it's gonna look like. So stick around, and we'll be back on the Benchwarmers.
Thanks for listening to the Benchwarmers Podcast. Follow along with us on the Benchwarmers Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to review us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.